Before I start, I'd like to thank my mother and father. And please don't give me the lowest speaker score. That's not possible because you have only one good debater there. Okay, I'm start. Who's chairing? Mr. Speaker, today's problem with the motion is this. We believe that there is a deliberate state exclusion of a group of people, and this minority group we identify as a disabled. So, before I start the debate, let me just describe for you what we mean by disabled students. We are not talking about those people who are comatose, who cannot be taught. We're talking about those educatable disabled, meaning those who are handicapped, they can't move around, who need wheelchairs. Secondly, we're talking about those who are deaf and those who cannot speak, the dumb. And we say that right now, what happened is that they are now excluded from mainstream education and they are put in special needs schools where they study together for the sake of efficiency, for the sake of specialized teachers having to teach them. We say that policy is not good, it's pessimistic, it's hopeless, it shuts people out from the national life of a society. And we say that is the problem we face if we want to solve that problem. We say that the better policy, and our stand is this, our stand is very clear. We want a hopeful policy of inclusion so that there will be diversity among students who know that, yeah, there are people who are not like you, who are studying among you. And secondly, we say that we want this to be inclusively inclusive. And this is our policy. Our policy is very simple. We're not stupid enough to say that all schools must do this. No. We say only school with the facility and amenity to support disabled, the deaf and the dumb should be allowed to do that. And we'll start with a first step where key school could do that. And secondly, we say to you that the students who are actually in this school, those who are disabled, no thank you, and those who are deaf and dumb, will not be educated the same way as a normal student, because we recognize the special needs. But we'll create what we call Center of Excellence or Special Needs within this mainstream school. What's the point? They will be educated academically, separately, but for all intent and purpose, they will follow the same calendar of event for the entire school year. For example, they eat breakfast in the canteen, and they will take part in sports event if they can, and they will take part in school activities. They will enjoy all the festivities, and they will be socialized. That is well. Now, before I go on, any question?
Sir, do you agree that the purpose of an education system is to make sure that every student has the maximum opportunity for academic excellence?
No. We believe that one of the prime purpose of the mainstream education is not only to just to give you the ability to read, write, and understand each other in terms of language. We say one of the key purpose of having a mainstream education is for you to be socialized into the national life. We believe that one of the key reasons why you must have an education within the national school system is that so that you know that you are Korean, you know that you are Japanese, because you gather around, you learn the same stuff, and you grew up together as a nation. That's the point. I have three arguments for you. I'll talk about integration and equality of educational right. My second speaker will talk about these three ideas, which are excellent, about the benefits of how this policy will accelerate R&D for educational research and infrastructure provision. And secondly, she'll talk about the idea of how this will create positive mindsets in the family environment for disabled children and those things. No, thank you. Let me get on to the first argument. Surely, you heard from me that there is a problem. The problem of deliberate state marginalization of a minority group, of people who are excluded. You and I can tell that we don't see blind people amidst you. We don't see the deaf studying with you or having lunch with you. We don't see the disabled in your canteen in school. And we say that kind of deliberate exclusion by a state is hopeless and pessimistic for the reason that they want these people to be taken care of. They think that disabled are not only disabled physically, they also debate disabled mentally, they also debate disabled socially. And we say that's wrong. We see there's an increasing trend, no thank you, in national life of any country to provide ramps, to provide roads that have got pimples so that you know the blind can go, and traffic lights with sound, no thank you. We see that the positive inclusion of the disabled in mainstream life on the street and in buildings and on public transport must be carried out within the school system too. And we say that this exclusion policy is a deliberate and a very horrible exclusion by the state. We say the students need to be integrated for the simple reason that these disabled students are part of the youth that belongs to any country. We say, why you should exclude? They have to answer the question, no thank you. Or why these passionate people who have physical disability, who are educatable, should be excluded just because of this disability. We say disabled doesn't mean you're not able. Disabled is just physical. Other than that, you are completely the same. And we say that the more we include people, the more it is better for democracy, where more inclusiveness and pluralism should flourish. No thank you. Oh yes.
Would your government also abolish religious, ethnic and single-sex schools, sir?
Now that's different, okay? I don't know where to go with the argument. We are saying to you that, let's bring it very clearly to our second argument, which is the equality of educational right of every student in society. Now, we all hold as a self-evident truth that education is increasingly one of the most fundamental rights that you all have. And we say that education is not enough if you only educate separately, on your own, away from the national school. And because we believe that education is not for you to be just a functional member of society where you can read, write, and talk. You must have somebody to talk to, somebody to read to, or read with. And we say the whole process of being socialized into the mainstream is part of the reason why you must allow the disabled to join the mainstream. To not only be in an environment where there's education, but be in an environment where education involves your idea of what it means to be a Korean or a Japanese, or in this case, a Chinese. So therefore, we believe that this fundamental right to be educated must be allowed and must be included for the disabled in the mainstream education. After all, they are no different from you. They may be disabled, but they are able. With that, we are very proud to open this debate.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, it's nice for Lope to talk about hope. It's nice for Lope to talk about inclusion. It's nice for Lope to talk about rights. But let's be clear what this debate is about. It's not about one side who wants to be helpful and nice to people with disabilities and one side that is mean and vicious. Both teams in this debate believe we must provide the best opportunities for disabled people, the greatest possible opportunity that they are capable of, depending on their particular and special needs. The only question in this debate is how best to provide that outcome, that opportunity to those people. And we're not going to give them opportunity with words. We're not going to give them opportunities with a warm feeling inside because we claim to be inclusive. We're going to give them opportunities and we provide them with the level of support and assistance that they need to get the maximum academic and educational result. And the simple truth is that you cannot both spread your resources thinly and provide the best possible opportunity at the same time. And that's why increasingly we're seeing the trend around developed nations, around developing countries in the West and other parts of the world towards increased specialisation in education. We're seeing more charter schools, more select entry schools where students have to pass rigorous academic exams to be put in schools with other high academic achieving students to create kind of hothouses for education where the best and brightest compete. We're seeing increased, we're seeing increased curriculum specialisation, schools that have a special focus on art, schools that have a special focus on music, schools that have a special focus on sport and on athletics. Recognising that children want to specialise and focus on areas where they are skilled, and if we pool the resources together into one or two small locations, we can give the best opportunities for those children who have special needs and have special skills. And the same thing works in reverse for those children that have reduced abilities. They need special attention, they need special resources, special equipment, specially trained teachers. And you simply can't have that level of specialisation, that level of quality and skill spread out across the entire education system, where every school is going to need facilities. I'll take you a moment. Where every school is going to need physical facilities to allow wheelchair access and for other physical needs, and where every school is going to need specially trained teachers who know how to help those students that might have mental and intellectual impairment. You can't have both. Unfortunately, there's just not enough money for that. Ma'am.
I mean, it's all great and nice that we are specializing for these normal students, but where are these disabled students given the same kind of opportunity for these specialized and special type of education that the normal people are getting?
Sure. Well, let's just be clear, right? If a student has a physical disability but otherwise has no mental impairment, there is no reason why special schools that have the physical needs for those children, not just to mention doors wide enough for wheelchairs to enter, but also teachers who might have a degree of medical training to assist with medical problems that disabled students often face as well. There's no reason why those schools can't also provide a strong maths program, a strong language program, a strong science program. But the point is that if you're going to try to spread those teachers out, you're never going to have that level of success. And you know why? Because even taking out disabled students, the education system isn't working well now. We don't have enough teachers who are highly skilled in maths. We don't have enough teachers who are highly skilled in science. And when you're trying to spread the talent out of maths and science teachers across the education system, we're seeing standards generally fall or stay the same in most Western countries because we're not able to provide that level of care. It's unfortunate and no one's happy about it, but let's just be honest about the world we live in. Governments have a limited amount of money, a limited amount of political will, and we either spend that by pooling our resources well, or we waste it by spreading it too thinly in the hope that we make people feel better about themselves. So let's be clear about the case we wanted to deliver to you today, sir. The opposition team is in favour of the specialised schools that Lope was outraged by. We're in favour of the special locations that provide this level of assistance, and we think they should stay, and we think they should be increased. No thank you, because they are the solution to the problem. And I'm going to tell you a bit more about the practical problems that their model will create, and why the students will be worse off in a practical sense. And my second speaker is going to tell you about the social and educational impacts specifically of this model. But let's go into a bit more detail about the practical problems, because we've already shown how in a limited budget with wide distribution of schools and students, if you spread that money out too thinly, then you are meaning that some of these disabled students are going to be in schools where the resources are very limited. Some of their teachers are going to have very little training in how to help them, very little opportunity and experience at it. Some of the schools will have only the basic physical changes necessary to allow their students to enter the schools, which might mean they can't make full use of the library, full use of the gym, full use of all the facilities of the school because only minimal amount of resources is available. No thank you. And it also means that we're not going to have the level of respect that comes from people being properly trained to deal with these issues. But more to the point, because schools already face a very heavy economic burden to try to provide the resources and the equipment and the teachers that schools demand today, because they're competing with each other for students, they're competing with each other for the best teachers, and their resources are stretched very thinly. Because of that, many schools will look for opportunities to exclude those students that place an extra economic burden on them. And you can't get out of this by just saying, we think schools should be inclusive. We know that schools already under the status quo, look for opportunities to exclude students that have special educational needs because they just cost too much money for that school, and that extra cost creates problems and creates trade-offs that the school don't want to take. That's unfortunate, but there are many subtle ways that schools can get around it. Schools can require referrals for applications for students. They can place academic and physical tests for students and claim that this is part of the culture of the school. They can have location tests that say you must live within a particular area to be eligible to go to this school. There are many ways that schools very cleverly and very subtly reject those students that they don't want. That's why even some government-run schools can have a reputation for being places where only rich students go and only the elite students go, even though in theory they're supposed to be open to everyone. So we don't want to have an opportunity where disabled students have to fight for entry into a school. We want them to go to a school where they are welcomed. We want them to go to a school where the teachers want them to be there, where the administrators want them to be there, because that's the purpose of those schools, is to help those children. We think that's what's going to give these kids much more hope and opportunity. But secondly, we need to be clear about what the trend is in this debate. Not only is the educational trend towards increased specialisation of schools, because that benefits students, and we think it would benefit physically disabled and mentally disabled students as well, but secondly, the trend towards deinstitutionalisation, that is, taking people who have disabilities out of special care facilities, has largely been seen as a failure because it's pushed the resources and the effort back onto parents. Governments have reduced their budgets and reduced their spendings and assumed that the community can just pick up the slack. That's not happening now, and that's why Loke's not seeing disabled people in all the places he wants to see them, because we're not doing a good enough job now. We need to get serious about providing special needs and special resources. That's what the opposition brings. We beg to oppose.
Mr. Chair. Tim has spent a better part of his speech telling us how education today has become increasingly specialized, increasingly chartering to different needs of students. But one big thing that he has completely ignored, and very decidedly ignored, is the fact that these charter schools and special schools give one thing which disabled students do not. They give them choice. They give them acceptance and normality within the society. What Tim tells us is that because you are disabled, and because we think that you need to be taken special care of, and because we don't want to deal with you, it is best we put you away from society. And we think that is a big misrepresentation on the side of the opposition towards the case of the government. We on the side of the government have told you that in the idea of education, and in the idea of trying to deal with people within the society, we think it is best that you integrate these people into society. We do not say that we don't care about your special needs. We do not say that we just throw you into the sharks. Rather, if the side of the opposition had listened to our model carefully, you will see that most of Tim's speech is already rendered a fallacy. So I'll start with these two ideas. His first argument was that it's more towards recognizing special needs. I've pointed out choice does not exist for disabled students in this case. And his biggest idea was the problem of facility and money, meaning that you will be spread too thin and most schools won't have the money. If he had listened to Loke's proposal, very clearly we have said this is not a flip over policy. We will start with special schools, but the point is they are mainstream schools, not separated into disabled or special needs schools, meaning not every school suddenly is going to have to be a disabled center, but specific schools, which all these other schools have more money because in certain areas, or schools where there is a concentration of disabled students, will be the ones who are given those centers. Now, if they had listened, this wouldn't have been a problem. Sit down. Now, moving on into the three arguments that I have. First, I will talk about acceleration of R&D on special education need, which will further answer the concerns that Tim have. Secondly, I will talk about the societal development, particularly of facilities and convenience. And thirdly, I will talk about a more psychological sense towards the environment it will create for families with disabled children. Now, the first idea, one of the main things that they have been so scared about is the fact that schools cannot deal with these special needs children. And we question them why. Most of it is because the government as a whole, or society as a whole, does not recognize the need for pluralistic education. Most of the time they think that certain groups or certain authorities who are responsible for these special needs should be responsible for the development of this kind of pluralistic education for children with disabilities. Now, if you put them in the mainstream, if you put them out there with the rest of us, this creates the need or the urgency, more than that it creates the demand for the education system to develop developed in a positive way which will allow and cater to these special needs for the children. And this is something that the status quo does not address. So tell me what you think about that, Tim.
Ma'am, why do you think disabled students will be pleased to be segregated within schools where they have to suffer the embarrassment and stigma of being in the retards class because you don't have the guts to put them in a real class, which is what most people want?
Because maybe people like you calling them retards is exactly the problem.
Yes.
And most of the time, it's not even really that you're a bad person, Tim. It's just the fact that you're not used to having them around you. And that, we think, is the biggest problem which this side refused to address. Now, secondly, we talk about how the spillover effects is more than just the education system. Because we think that school becomes the center of where we perceive and how we look at society to grow. Now, the inclusion of schools within mainstream, the inclusion of disabled students within mainstream schools creates a bigger acceptance within the minorities. And we think this is just the same as when you start having more Muslim people in countries where they didn't used to. For example, countries like UK now have provision of halal food in the cafeteria, something which didn't happen when you didn't have Muslims. Like, for example, Korean kids now are more aware to the fact that I don't eat 돼지고기. So those kind of things, right? And that kind of awareness spills over in society. When you sit down, when you have kids in school and you force children to accept these kind of things, you create that same kind of growing awareness into society where you see buildings having to have more disabled facilities, having to have things like pimple floors for the blind, having to have things like braille as well as sound and traffic lights. And we think that kind of creation and that kind of spillover effect is very important. Yes, I am good.
Madam, do you realize what you're running, basically the American model, where having a special class in the public school, basically failed when they pushed in the no child left behind policy, and everybody is forced to graduate because you have to go through the mainstream education. There is no specialization for these children.
Look, that's exactly the problem. They are assuming we are going to branch this out on every school just like that. That's the problem. America tried it too ambitiously. We think if you have a rollover effect instead of a flip effect, the wave or the natural progression will be much better. And that's what they refuse to accept. So finally, let's talk about the creation of a positive mindset in family environments. We think one of the biggest problems with disabled children is not just so much that they have trouble functioning in society, but also for the very fact that it also becomes a burden upon the families, or families think it's very hard for them to have these kind of children. Why? Because of things like special needs schools, because of things like having to make sure that their children will always need extra money, extra attention, because society refuses to accept and care for them. We think that this kind of integration, as proposed by the side of the government, alleviates the burden for families as well, thus creating and helping a more positive environment as well as a more hopeful one for people who have disabled children. It's the same thing like, for example, in the past when women had no rights or women had no jobs. Because society can't accept them, most parents don't want baby daughters. But nowadays, we think that the trend have definitely changed. And we think the trend can change for disabled students as well. In that breath, Mr. Chair, we on the side of the government are proud to propose.
Let me segregate it. Ladies and gentlemen, I've realized now after listening to Lynn's speech that the government team is not so different from us. They also want to segregate these children, except they're going to segregate them in the same school. They're going to put them into a different class. Now, I think it's fair enough to assume that this class is going to be much smaller. The class will probably be further away from the other classes. The only time you'll see these children maybe at recess or when they're sneaking around and, when they're trying to hide away from the kids who are bullying them. There's not that big of a difference between both sides of the houses then. I believe that these children deserve special attention and special care. And they deserve a special teaching skills and deserve special teachers. The question is, how is it best to provide these things to these children? We believe that if you're going to do it right. Build the whole school, build the facilities, make sure everybody gets the right kind of access that you want. We don't think you should try to do both and achieve too little. Because these children are going to end up being minorities within these schools. And we know how schools work. They get a fixed amount of budget, the school board must decide what to do for everybody. When you have 10 of these kids in the school, another 3,000, and you decide whether you want to build a new playground or a ramp, you're going to build and you're going to spend more of these things on things that affect every other student and not these students. These students are still going to end up being the minority, and we think that's not the message that you want to send them. I'm going to look at 3 issues of clash at the start, and then extend our argumentation by talking about the social and educational impacts. The 3 areas: 1, the purpose of education, what it should be; secondly, this notion of practicality and isolation, which I've touched on a little bit already; and thirdly, the part which I thought Lynn was bringing in new in the debate, which is the impact of this policy and the views of disabled people in the long run in society. The purpose of education, and Tim asked a very good point of information to Lok at the start. Well done, Tim, that was good. About why the purpose of education should be. And Lok said, no, it's not about developing people as individuals and making sure you excel in your own capacity, but it's about integrating people. We don't buy into this socialist worldview that Lok has, right? Because we think it's wrong. We don't think that's what education systems do. They do not mold everybody to be exactly the same type of person and make sure you have all these exact same worldviews. But 2, we think they're inconsistent. When we further asked him, what about all these other things that are different? Why on one hand do you say only disabled people cannot have their own schools and should not have their own schools, but people who are religious can, and people who are different ethnicity can, people who are different gender can have their own schools, but disabled people can't? So I think that's a form of reverse discrimination. No, thank you, Lok. So we think the purpose of education, and we showed, and as trends show that Sim has argued and has not been responded to, leads towards this idea of specialized care and specialized attention for people of different levels and different learning abilities, and maybe even different aims. The second is this notion of practicality and what can achieve. I think we've showed that if you're going to segregate people either way, it's better to segregate the way that we showed on this side of the house. Thirdly, in this notion of the impact of policy and worldviews. They want the world to become a situation where you don't look at people based on a disability and everything's equally accessible for everybody. So that the fact that you are blind or the fact that you're in a wheelchair shouldn't hamper how you move around and access features and facilities, which we think is awesome. The question is how you achieve them. We don't think you achieve them by using disabled children as a battering ram for social change. We don't think you achieve them by putting these children out and saying, hopefully one day people will know, because they've been bullied enough in schools, that we will realize we've seen what a disabled person is like, now we will be kinder towards them. We don't think that's how 5-year-olds operate, Mr. Speaker. Given that we are debaters, I'm sure we've all been bullied before in schools for being nerds and being on the debate squad, and we know how much more extreme that can become if you're disabled. Second, but more than that, we think our system achieves that better. When you can ensure people who are disabled get better education, we think that leads to them moving up and getting access to more things in life in a moment, and achieving that kind of social mobility. And when they become professionals, adults, politicians, legislators, because they've got the maximum benefit from their education system that they can achieve, that's when they'll get the social change that is required. Yes?
That's very fine and good, and I agree with it. But so far, history has shown acceptance and change comes only when government forces.
Yes, when governments force, not 5-year-olds in a wheelchair, not children who are deaf that you put into a school and you hope that they will vote. Government should. And if anybody's being idealistic, I think you guys are being idealistic. Because you think if we put children into a class in a school, not mixed into the class, mind you, but in a special class of their own, we think that will lead to greater integration. Let me move on and talk about my extension of my argument. Not yet, mate, maybe in a while. Tim talked about the trends towards specialization and the purpose of education. I'm going to talk about the social aspects of it. Now, we think equal does not mean the same. If you want to give people equal amount of education, that equality must be based on your needs and your capacity. Something which they agree because they're going to segregate people also anyway. And we think of 2 big areas that's important. One, on the amount of attention and the capacity of teachers and how they give them to the students. Something which they actually agree, so I don't really need to develop this that much more. But it's the question of whether you can have it or not. And the second idea and issue is how then teachers have to handle classes And when it comes to things like when there's bullying that happens in schools, when one child is suffering not because of the ability to cope with the class, but the ability to cope with their friends, with their ability to socialize, right? And we think this is... Okay, sure, go.
Bullying happens all the time. In your logic, then fat people must go to one school, skinny must go to another. Because everybody will bully for all kinds of reasons, including disability.
Number one, being fat is transient. You can stop being fat. It's difficult to stop being deaf after a while. It's difficult to suddenly gain function of your legs, right? Number two, how many fat people or tall people or short people and the proportion of those that exist within schools and environment is far higher, we think, than they are disabled people. A child who is deaf, a child who is blind, right, would stick out like a sore thumb. I don't know how a sore thumb actually sticks out, but it will stick out very obviously, and we think that's a big problem. But what Lok just did is he conceded that bullying always happens. And nowhere in their policy, they talk about how they can reduce this. What they're going to do is accentuate the fact. They're not even going to pretend that disabled children can be the same as they say, normal children by treating them the same way. They will put them in the same environment and isolate them in the same environment, and we think that's bad. We believe you should allow disabled children to integrate to society based on their own means and their own abilities. The point of education, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is not to force everybody to be the same. That's just going to lead to conflict. But the point of education is to develop people to the best of their abilities, and we think we've shown on opposition that you achieve that best under our model.
Mr. Speaker, in this debate today, let's step back and actually look at the argumentation and developed of the first half of this debate. We see clearly issues of the meaning of education, the purpose of schools, the social perception, and at the end of the day, what's best for these individuals that are disabled itself. Let's go into each part first, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, the meaning of education. Team come up here and describe the maximum potential, but maximum excellence in the individual level. But we say clearly that is a utopia in itself, Mr. Speaker, because it does not happen in the school anyway. The problem is that to try to facilitate as much as you can, provide them as you can in that line. But we also see this. Education itself is a holistic process. Not only giving the academic point of view with Team 1 so much, but also giving the integration to society. Able to implement that academic back to society, back to the real world itself in the life. It also is a process not to create a culture shock to these individuals. Let them be ready for those things in the real world. Sit down. The problem is that they are overprotecting these individuals, that when they go into the real world, they create even more harm to because their protected environment is not the same at all with that environment. What we are giving in our education system is we're giving a simulation place, a place that they will be safe in the law of the school, protecting that line, but also integrate as well. That option is there. Sit down. In this school, ladies and gentlemen, is that a separate school institution. That is a separate building, separate program itself. They have no choice, as my Speaker Lin discussed upon, to go integrate elsewhere. In our policy that Lok discussed upon is that option is there. You can be protected in your environment, you can be maximize your potential, but the option to go out to different classes outside, meet other people, integrate to meet classes, that option is available there. Sit down. That's the primary issue with their premise and with our premise from today. But we also say this, Mr. Speaker, is that even today the trend that Tim discussed upon specializing education is not really real. You think about it, ladies and gentlemen. Engineers, doctors, specific skill sets these days, study other skills as well. Management, ladies and gentlemen. Sit down, ladies and gentlemen. I'm in education, so even so that's the case, that is true. Because even so, sir, you're debating right now means you're learning much more scope than your academic point of view anyway. Because people want a holistic view, want to see the world in a more academic point of view itself. But also think about this, the purpose of school. They said, well, schools are limited, feasibility issue, problem financially. We can see the problem, but we see clearly, key schools can still do this. We say that each area can create a center of this location, can bring about these people to being grounds that level. That is a benefit itself. We can group these people to get the benefit towards it. But quite interesting, let's think about this. We, in shopping malls, do we have these facilities? Yes. In MRT, going down subway, we have this. Yes. When we have public transport, we have it. The state actually requires these locations that are public use to have facilities. Why not schools? Let's ask that question. Because they have to. Because school is even for most a place to give this. Not only that, to change social perception itself. Yes, Logan.
Low conceded bullying and stigmatization happens, and it will happen worse under your model. What are you doing to prevent it?
Logan, how does it become worse? Because in your premise, bullying will happen outside, where there's no protection, even more pragmatic, and it comes back hurt. In our situation, bullying may sit down, madam, down, sir. The problem may happen, it's still in the era. Not only that, they can be educated to say this is not the way to go. That's why school in the first place is to create social norm, to change the individual itself. But let's go another further step, social perception. Because the whole problem is this. They live in their world, we live in our world. That is the problem we're having in this today. If we live in the same premise, the problem is that culture shock in both levels, Mr. Speaker. Why? Firstly, when these people go inside the integration into the real world, they feel this is not the commonplace they feel. They feel facilities are not ready for them as a line. But we see that even so, these individuals, I never see these people. You are actually targeting these people with you are disabled. But the question is that disabled does not mean you're not normal. You are normal. Yes. And that's exactly what we want to do of our integrated process, is to create that disabled means normal. Just being different, like color, like race. Same thing. He is a human being like all of that concept. The only way to do it is educational process, integration, holistic point of view. The school and education has the objective to down him. Objective to provide the services and provide that goal to itself very clearly. But we also see this. What's good for these people? Very clear. This debate today is not about evil or good. It's about giving a realistic point of view and fixing the problem of the status quo. Is that perception of the society. And the best way to do it is to target into education. What's happening today, Mr. Speaker? Disabled people are being bullied. As Logan said, we agree. So what should we do? Can we stop bullying? We may not. But we can create a safe environment that can regulate, can process, can help them out in that line. Not only that, we can do slow steps of assisting these people to let them understand their skill set, their skill set of knowledge, what they know, and also the mainstream education process as well. That's one thing, because what status quo is doing right now is that it's not the mainstream education, it's separate, it's different. That's the problem we're having. When they can't understand or feel the real system, they can't integrate easily. And that's a problematic issue itself. So we say clearly that, yes Tim, go.
So if you're so in favour of inclusiveness and a completely transparent system, why are you putting these kids in a separate classroom? Why can't they share the same maths classroom and the same English classroom with everybody else?
Tim, the same reason you're doing, because we see the special needs. We see in the first stage. But still, in the first stage, we can still do it. What else? We can move on to the second stage. We can go to the third stage. But the thing is that with your premise, Tim, there's no choice for them. For us, we have the choice in our premise. In our today's debate, what have we shown you today? We've shown you clearly meaning of education, saying that the state wants to integrate, want to create a more peaceful environment, a more integrated society as a whole. And the best way is going back to education itself. Locke has done a great job actually explaining to you about equality, about all these things that about we have to give this right to itself. But not only that, Lynn provided you a more practical context, is that this will actually further benefit these individuals even more. Because not only they get the knowledge, understanding of educating themselves as self-individual, but also these people feel empowered. They feel that they are part of society. They feel they're more integrated. Not only that, but we also talk about that society feels that they are normal. Disabled is able, and they are normal in society. The only way to do it is to go back and teach us, and to tell them that we are together. Thank you.
As opposition whip speaker, I have 4 issues to bring up to this debate. Number 1, is there a problem with marginalization in the status quo? Number 2, what does education mean to us and our society? Number 3, what do these children, those disabled students in any school need? And number 4, how do we actually bring engagement? And in this issue, I will be talking about the problem and solvency that is lacking in the government case. But before I go on, I'd like to clear up something and once and for all stop talking about this issue because we're all quite sick of it. Where does bullying actually happen and what do we do about it? Now, the biggest problem that TJ has created for the government bench is that he has conceded that bullying does happen and it's actually worse because bullying happens outside. But ladies and gentlemen, the problem is number 1, if he's admitting that bullying happens outside the school boundaries, he's saying that there is engagement, there is no such marginalization. We do actually see people who are disabled in our society, which contradicts with you, Mr. Fox. Sit down. Number 2, in our model, ladies and gentlemen, the disabled students are better prepared for bullying in or outside of school. Inside the school, there is no bullying because there is no younger children who think they are superior. It's just because they simply don't know better. But secondly, in our model, when they go outside of the classes, they are protected by teachers and parents, and they are better prepared. And when they do go out into the society, that's after they've learned about what are the things that you do after you get bullied or when you do get bullied to make our society better. In their model, however, they either need, number 1, CCTV cameras that will monitor every single child at every single moment in bathrooms and locker rooms just to make sure bullying doesn't happen, or they just allow people to bully these children, hoping that that will somehow be portrayed as engagement. We say shame on you, government team. Yes.
Are you saying that disabled in a specialized school are separate, sane angels and don't bully each other? They do! We are all human! They bully each other! Bullying happens everywhere!
Yes, we do. We do bully each other all the time. But there's a significant difference between myself bullying Logan because he's brown, but being friendly about it because we can laugh at it, and somebody saying, oh, you can't talk, you're stupid, you're not a part of our society, you don't belong in this school, go to your own place. That is the significant difference, and the biggest problem is that these children will be traumatized and hurt for the rest of their lives, and there is no way going back because there's no way you can undo this disability, ladies and gentlemen. So let me go into the first issue. Is there a problem of marginalization? Sit down, madam. So, we say from the government team's point, we don't see much difference between the status quo of where we see marginalization and their model. Because they say special schools are going to make it a marginalized place. Well, how is it different from special classes? Yes, they say like they're going to engage with other students, they're going to see other students, regardless of whether they're blind or deaf. They're going to see other students and feel that they are a part of the community. Ladies and gentlemen, just because you're in a different school does not mean you're not a part of the community. In fact, it could actually mean the community cares enough for you to build the specialized schools to cater your needs, ladies and gentlemen. That's exactly what the opposition wants to do. Whereas they think if you put them in a specialized school, sit down, sir. If you put them in a specialized school, you're trying to tell them that you don't belong in our community. That is not the case that opposition tried to make today. Number 2 is what does education actually mean? Mr. Fat comes up here and says education is about bringing social code and making sure that people feel belonging. I wonder how much these children are going to feel like they belong in our society when they're always bullied because of their physical and mental capacities, ladies and gentlemen. But more importantly, we have told you that the purpose of education, the reason we say certain level of education has to be mandatory for all citizens is because we want to maximize the intellectual opportunity of these people, of everyone, regardless of what condition they are in, so that they can do better when they go out into society. In fact, if education education is about integration, is about diversity, is about engagement, why are we going to allow all these charter schools, religious schools, and single-sex schools where you actually say we belong in different places? We're not going to be able to say, one sec, we're not going to be able to come together in one classroom. Yes, sir?
The reason is very simple. Why are religious schools single-sex is because they run the national curriculum.
No.
Number one, no, they will have different curriculums because you will have different additional curriculums that will define your knowledge and values differently from other people. Number two, that does not answer how come these certain groups can be segregated or be put it into a different place from all the other people, ladies and gentlemen. So let's look into what these students actually need. Now, both sides of the house, sit down, madam, I've taken two. Both sides of the house decided, agreed that special care is needed. We actually, in fact, opposition has proven to you how to bring better care, more specialized care, and have more practicality for these students at all times. Whereas government has simply failed to tell us how they're going to match up to the care, the level of care and professionalism that is given to the students under their model. But the issues are still standing there in terms of what they need. Number one, do we actually need exposure of these students for them and for all the normal or not disabled students? And secondly, do these students have to be reinforced of the sense of community and ownership? The government team, the way they approach this issue is very simplistic and very naive. They say you put them in the same building, it doesn't matter what curriculum they go into, it doesn't matter what kind of teachers to teach them. However, as long as they're in the same building, we will be able to force the notion of equality and sameness, ladies and gentlemen. Opposition disagrees. We believe that if you can disagree that there is a difference, just like how there is a difference between men and women physically. However, as long as you tell them you are a part of community and you are being given these special educations because we want you to excel, because we want you to do better by having this special education, then the value becomes the same. These students will be able to do better as a part of our community, and they will be more prepared to excel as what they want to do in the society. So, at the end of the day, how do we actually bring engagement between the disabled and non-disabled students? Ladies and gentlemen, the government has been wanting to put a blanket policy saying these disabled children, just because they don't have a choice of which school they get to go to, just because they have to go to one specific specialized school, there is a problem. We say that choice right now, in their case, is only a choice about if you want to be bullied at one school or bullied at another school. We say that is simply naive and that is not going to work. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, we've had an animated conversation, and I'd like to think this is because we all care so deeply. We all want to have the best opportunities for those who suffer from disabilities. We all want to see them get the best life opportunities, the best outcomes, the best jobs, the best lives they can possibly have. And we have apparently violently disagreed about how to provide that. But that's good, that's healthy. Let's try and take a step back and have a look at where the disagreements were and how the teams addressed these issues. The first one was at the early part of the debate where there was a heavy focus on what is the role and purpose of education. And at the beginning there was a principal distinction made between one side who believed that the fundamental purpose of education was to give as much academic opportunity as possible, to maximise the ability for each student to get the most improvement and achievement and skill in whatever areas where they have talent that was possible to them. Of course, schools can also do other useful things. Schools can teach you how to swim so you don't drown when you're on holiday, and that's good and we're all for that. But it's not the principal aim of schools. The number one aim of the education system is to provide that maximum opportunity, whatever that might be, obviously different people having different skills. Our opposition had a different view, bless their hearts. They wanted to see schools as about social inclusion. Schools were places where we built the nation. Schools were places where we taught Korean people what it means to be Korean, as though there was some way they weren't going to be sure about that. But they very quickly gave up on this idea of social inclusion because their model was of social exclusion. What they wanted was for disabled children to be close enough to see how really different they are, but not actually so close as to really interact with those people to whom they are different. And we thought it's interesting that the social inclusion line fell away, because it's hard to talk about segregation and social inclusion at the same time. The second area of difference in this debate was really about practical differences, and we all wanted to acknowledge in the debate that there are real limitations in the world when we talk about educations and budgets. There's not enough money right now for all of the kids who have needs that aren't necessarily of the disability kind to make sure they get the skills they need in maths and science and language. We already have pockets of disadvantage in every developed country in the world where the school system is not what we would want it to be. So living in that world where that is the case, what is the best way to spend the limited budgets that exist? We told you the best way was to pool those resources so that you could have a smaller number of highly specialised schools with highly trained teachers and good equipment and resources. Because by definition, the moment you try to spread that out into more and more locations, the more you have to spread out the quality. Because the same budget can either pay for a small number of highly trained people or a larger number of less trained people. That's just fundamental economics. You can either have 2 professors or 3 undergraduates, but you can't have 3 professors for the same price that you would otherwise have had. So that's just a choice that's required, and we think that's important, and the government's bench helpfully conceded that point when they accepted the fact that the reason why even they weren't prepared to desegregate entirely is because these people have special needs. We say if they have special needs, do the absolute most you can for them, and don't dress up a pretend level of choice and somehow say that's more beneficial to them than actually getting the resources that they need. And finally, we talked about social difference, and we said you have to be aware that schools are harsh places and children are very unkind. And we were surprised a bit that there was much less sympathy from the government bench about bullying than we expected. I mean, I would have thought, as an overweight Chinese boy whose name is Fat, Loke would have known how brutal and harsh children can be. I'm sure it wasn't that great. But somehow they thought, no, survival of the fittest will reign. Somehow teachers will protect these students. Somehow the rules of the school will work. Even though they admit that teachers can't protect the fat kids and they can't protect the skinny kids and they can't protect the Chinese kids now, but somehow in the future these schools and rules and laws will protect the most vulnerable and the most marginalised, who are the easiest to pick out and to bully of the whole school. What we've told you in this debate is that it's important that we recognise the real needs that these students have. We want them to go to a school where they are not defined in opposition to others who have different abilities to them. We want them to go to a school where every focus is on their needs and their benefits. That's what they need. That's why we beg for it.
And so, Mr. Chair, question. What is the purpose of education? Side opposition would want you to believe that education is about giving the best type of attention, giving the best type of education you possibly can. We never really dispute. We didn't say that that's not the case. We agree on that. But we think school provides or serves a much deeper purpose than that. It serves as the foundation of where you build people to go into society. It serves as that institution which mirrors the society. And that's something that they have never dealt with. We on the side of the government have shown you that what we are doing is not just to put them close enough to see people. We say we put them in the same school, that apart from classes, which obviously needs to tend to their special needs,